so much for being here today. We are grateful that you took a time out of your busy schedule to join us to talk about how institutions and places that involve and need instructional designers, so everywhere, has responded to the COVID-19 pandemic and has lessons learned. This is an opportunity for us to talk to each other, to learn from each other, and hopefully to find things that we can do that will allow us to be better instructional designers or administrators or instructional technologists, wherever we fall on that spectrum. So just a couple of things to remind you, this session is going to be recorded. We will post this on our YouTube channel and send out information for anybody who wants to review this or share this with people who are unable to attend. Everybody except for the panelists and I will be muted. If you have questions or comments, and we encourage you to share your questions and comments, please do that in the chat box, and Catherine is going to be moderating that and will stop us and share those ideas. So please, this is meant to be a discussion, but because there are it's a large group here, we want to make sure that we don't have audio issues in background. So we're going to utilize the chat feature for that. And again, the only people who will have webcams enabled are the panelists and I. So you can hide any other video panel so that you can only see the presenters if you would like. So I do see some people here who are new that I haven't seen at any Instructional Design Network or AIDN, we call ourselves, activities. So I wanted to take a few minutes just to update you on what we're doing, where we are in that process. We try to do this at the beginning of every activity because we are new and we are trying to get this network up and going. So we are a network of instructional designers who are trying to communicate to instructional designers and people associated with instructional design throughout the state of Alabama. We have right now 4 board members. So my name is Courtney Felton. Catherine Jarnigan is from Samford University. Crystal Mealer is from University of Alabama. And Courtney Garza is also from the University of Alabama at Birmingham, same as I am. So we are the 4 starting members, board members of this organization. And so we are slowly making our way through the process of becoming a recognized entity so that we can fundraise and do things like that legally. So we have filed paperwork with the Secretary of State. We are officially an organization now, legally recognized nonprofit organization in the state of Alabama. We have submitted paperwork or are working on submitting paperwork to become a federally recognized nonprofit for all of the tax and legal purposes. As I'm sure you're aware, COVID-19 has kind of made that more difficult, so that's going more slowly than we would like. We are hoping to have a fall forum. This would be our, holy cow, you guys, this would be our 3rd fall forum, 2nd fall forum. I'm old, I don't remember things. But for safety and because of COVID, we hope to do that virtually. We're not sure what that looks like. I feel like we hear that a lot now. We're not sure what it's gonna look like, but we're planning to do something. And we hope to begin electing officers next year so that more members can participate in our events and planning and helping direct where this goes. So that's a little bit of who we are. Our panel this afternoon is about mitigating student issues during the COVID-19 sudden adjustment that the institution had to make in the spring. So we have 3 panelists with us today. Hanna Tinker is the Manager of Instructional Technology Support Services for the College of Continuing Studies at the University of Alabama. She has a bachelor's degree in geography with a mathematics minor, a master's of arts in collaborative special education, and an education specialist degree in educational leadership with an emphasis in instructional technology. She's currently pursuing a PhD in instructional leadership with the concentration in instructional technology from UA. Her research interests are the effects of academic continuity on students and faculty, so very appropriate for what we're talking about. For the past 4 years, she has served as an adjunct instructor also within the College of Education, and she teaches a variety of technology classes geared towards future educators. She has experience teaching courses through face-to-face, hybrid, and online models, and she is in Port, Alabama with her son, Easton. So she has the perspective of an administrator, an instructor, and a student. So we're very grateful for her to be here to provide all three of those perspectives. Next, we have Marci Johns, who has been a supporter of AIDN from the very beginning, and we're very grateful for her and all she has done to help us out. She is the associate provost for accreditation, online, and professional studies at Samford University. She was previously the Vice President of Academics and Legal Studies for Faulkner University. And Legal Studies Professor for Faulkner University. Her specialty areas include online education and accreditation. She is a graduate of Auburn University in Montgomery and received a bachelor's in history and master's in public administration. And she received her JD from Faulkner University's Thomas Good Jones School of Law. And then we have Dreu Dixon, who is a rising sophomore at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. He is majoring in biology and minoring in chemistry. He has plans to go to medical school to be a pathologist. He graduated from Baker High School in Mobile, Alabama. With honors, he was a member of the National Honor Society and was also involved in other service-based organizations, including Environmental Club and Student Council. So we're very grateful for our panelists to be here today. And so with that, we are going to head into our discussion. So we asked people ahead of time to give questions to us that they would like to have asked. So we have those in addition to some questions that we wanted to ask. And then again, if you have any additional questions that come up, please feel free to share them in the chat box. So I want to start out by asking our panelists just overall to talk about how your institution responded to the COVID-19 pandemic, and maybe a little bit about what we know so far about how they're going to handle, how they're handling things in the summer and maybe into fall as much as they know. So I'm going to ask Marci to start, if you want to unmute yourself and go first.
All right, I hope you can all hear me. So how we handled things in the spring. I would say in the spring, probably like all of you, it was a very quick transition. And Samford is a primarily face-to-face institution. We do have several graduate online programs, and then we have online programs, all our courses throughout the undergraduate curriculum. But we only have one undergraduate fully online program. Again, most of ours are online graduate students. So switch to completely online and everyone went home was really quick. And when I say quick, we had probably, like most of you, probably 2 to 3 days. The email went out to faculty and we immediately jumped on board and started preparing for fully online instruction. And we handled that in a couple different ways. One, we learned quickly that the transition to an online course was probably not going to happen for most faculty. So instead, we flipped the switch to more emergency remote learning is what happened. And we had the modalities that we saw the most, just remote learning, and then a quick flip to fully online. at that point. So we struggled for the first few weeks with infrastructure issues. I'm sure all of you are experienced that as well. We had varying levels of technology across many different homes, faculty and students. So we had to really jump in and try to work through that. I would say one of the best things that we did that I'm most proud of for our institution, especially our instructional designers, is that we started a couple of years ago with a hard push towards standardization, lots of training. We have a mandatory checklist that faculty use, like many of you, to ensure quality in those courses. So we had already done a lot of preliminary training, but it was interesting because we kicked up the training exponentially after the move home, and it on a positive note, it provided an amazing opportunity for faculty to become, to really participate in a lot of professional development opportunities. I think last week we offered 49 professional development sessions for faculty with about 800 enrollments. So we would have never gotten that in a full spring semester under ordinary circumstances. So to be able to provide that training was really fantastic, and it was needs-based. So we continually assessed faculty needs as we went through and tailored the training to that. And all of that was managed by our instructional designers. And we have a faculty success collaborative that manages some training opportunities. So we teamed together, worked through that in the spring, which was great. For the summer, we are completely online or remote for the summer. So everyone is participating. We had about 35 brand new online courses that were under development or are under development for the summer, and they are all assigned to one of the instructional designers to work with. So we had a kind of an uptick, I think, in brand new, fully online courses. And we really tried to make sure that faculty understood the distinction between remote teaching, and remote teaching is not an online course. So that's an important concept we had to repeatedly emphasize. So we still have some that are engaging in remote synchronous teaching. They just left their class the same time, and they're planning on doing that through the summer. So we have remote teaching in the summer, and we have fully online courses in the summer. Those are really the only two options that we have right now, because no one is on campus at Samford like many of you. For the fall is one of those things where, day by day things change, but we do have a continuity of instruction task force that's been working on presenting different options for the fall. And of course that depends upon the current situation with COVID. So of course, if we have a green light, everything's great, and we have face-to-face instruction, highly doubtful that will happen. So we're leaning more towards hybrid development. We're of course looking at online courses, fully online courses. We'll have a number of brand new courses. In fact, the deans are scheduled to submit those to us by Monday for the fall. So we'll know how many fully online courses will be developed by faculty for the fall. And then we have some that are going to at least attempt the high flex model. So of course, as we've heard an awful lot of that lately in the news, but the high flex model seems to be very popular right now. It's very technology dependent, as you're all aware. So we are really struggling with how we're going to support that from a technology standpoint. It sounds like a good idea until we really start looking at all the components of that. So that's one area that I think we're going to have to put some resources and some training and really evaluate if that's going to be the best situation. And it's going to depend on the faculty member and the students and the technology that's in that classroom. So we're looking at lots of different options with that. Of course, face-to-face hybrid, a hybrid course, hopefully we'll be able to manage that. So those are kind of the different scenarios that we're looking at for the fall. And we just met this morning to tailor our summer training very specifically to those different modalities, so we can offer very customized and specialized training to try to fit at least some of those models for faculty. That
I definitely, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, no, no. I was just going to say, is there anything else?
Well, I definitely appreciate you making that distinction between online learning and remote teaching. I think that there are some faculty who are new, who haven't taught before, who are seeing remote teaching as online learning. And so I think we have opportunities in the instructional design field to help clarify not only what those models look like, but also
Mhm.
what's best practice in each of those, because they're not always the
Absolutely.
same.
Yes. Yes. Hmm.
Right. Hannah, do you want to ask the same question? What happened at UA?
Sure. So the Instructional Technology Support Group had a continuity plan that had been developed after the April 2011 tornado. And so part of that continuity plan was to go ahead and pull a list of all courses that had available online content. So we were prepared in the fact that we already knew what the College of Continuing Studies could provide content for. And we had developed a survey that allowed those instructors to opt into our content or not. So within about 2 days of the announcement coming through. Now, we were relatively lucky. The announcement for us came the Thursday before spring break, and then they extended our spring break. So we had about 10 working days to prepare for students to come back. And within that 10 days, we were able to push our content into about 200 sections. There were 1,000 available. And we also had some instructors that decided to just use part of our content. And so we were really flexible with our on-campus instructors of what they wanted of ours. Normally that content within the College of Continuing Studies is very protected. And so you have to be teaching an online course. It has to be coded a certain way, but we open that up to everyone to kind of make it through those last 4 or 5 weeks of class. So that worked very well. As far as faculty development and faculty preparation, the College of Continuing Studies has a really great partnership with the Center for Instructional Technology on campus. And so we kind of split duties. They were responsible for the professional development. They had Zoom sessions. They had Zoom trainings on Blackboard and all of the different tools that we have available. And if instructors needed additional help, they were forwarded to our office. We were also very lucky to have our team of instructional designers kind of pitch in and help the support group with this. There are lots of them, I think, in here. So we were very thankful for the assistance that they were able to give the support group, because under normal operations, we don't do design of courses, we support the courses. And so it was really a team effort within the College of Continuing Studies to kind of move all of UA online. So for summer, we're all online for summer. There is some weird rule within the UA system that classes with like less than 15, I think, can meet for what we consider summer 2. I'm not sure that any of our courses actually meet that threshold, so I assume that all of our summer 2 courses, which is our July semester, will mostly be online. And so we've worked with instructors and the Center for Instructional Technology to get all of our content into those courses, and for the instructors that wanted it. And we have really supported the remote learning versus online adaptation there. And for fall, it's really an unknown for us right now. We know we'll be back on campus in some capacity, but we've just been given a lot of vague communication of what that will look like. So from a CCS perspective, we are really preparing for, again, to push our content into any course that will need it. And for a lot of remote learning to also happen in the fall, whether it be hybrid or whether it be, fully online. So.
Thank you for bringing up. I was curious as to how summer 2 was going to happen on campus, because as part of the UA system, I saw that announcement. So it's interesting that may not happen due to class size. So Dreu, will you talk to us about your experience as a student And then also kind of if you'll lead us into the next topic, which is issues that you encountered. So what happened to you as a student, and then what were some of the issues that you or your peers at UAB or peers that you know of at other schools faced during this kind of immediate transition?
Okay. So can you hear me, everyone? All right,
Yep,
cool.
you're good.
So technologically, I was fine, but I do know that some people had issues running Zoom, so they couldn't really attend lectures sometimes, which of course impacted them academically. Not to mention some of the course load for like labs was not as easily digested, because labs are a physical kind of interaction. You have to be there to like fully understand what's going on. So lab scores typically went down. Chemistry in general, not a good time, but online it's almost impossible. So that's my experience with it. Everything else seemed to go well. Zoom meetings typically were on time and flowed well. I got what I needed out of them, and my friends typically had similar experiences, but there were some cases in which, like in recitation, which is like a UEB function for students to get bonus required study time for chemistries, things got weird and awkward because recitation is again, sort of a physical presence kind of thing. You have a study guide and you fill it out, and then the TA signs off on it and says, you did this section, so you can theoretically do well on the test. And so I had an example. I don't know where I put it. So you'd have to write it on paper, and then you have to show it to them. The workload was, in order to compensate for like the not being there physically, it was heavier, which made it more difficult to balance everything, because I mean, we've already gotten into the sort of rhythm in the start of the semester, to answer your question. Yeah, so that's about it. I would
So you were, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So you were here on you were on campus at UAB, right? So will you talk about a little bit about that transition that UAB had
sorry.
to? That's fine. Go ahead.
So during the last week before we all went home, we had a lineup of tests and everything like that, as you do before spring break. And, we'd gotten the email while we were, like, I want to say the last day before we left. And everyone was like sort of in a panic about it because we didn't quite know how this would have been handled. So we sort of alighted the campus as instructed. And it was just a lot. It was a big shift from physical classes to online classes, and that again threw off the entire rhythm of, scheduled learning, I guess is a way to say it. Because at home there are a lot of distractions, and the chemistry department and a bunch of other departments do their best to like provide resources as to, prepare the students. I'm trying to phrase this. To prepare the students for the upcoming challenge, but oftentimes it slightly fell short, and that again created more issues. So it was a difficult transition, but not one that couldn't have been overcome given more preparation time.
And the experiential learning, kind of the labs and stuff that you bring up is interesting. That's what our next panel discussion next week will be about, is how people tried to adapt those experiential learning classes for students, because labs, of course, were a major issue, internships, rotations, and things like that. So we'll be focusing on that next week. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Hannah, will you chime in kind of from the student perspective in terms of problems that you may have faced or issues? And then Taylor, we'll get to your other question I see in the chat.
Sure. So like Courtney said earlier, I'm a PhD student, so I only take 1 or 2 classes a semester. And one of the classes I had in the spring was a survey research class, and we were using statistical programs to run analysis on certain like answers to surveys. And I will say that my instructor was very prepared to switch. So I more feel for her that we ended up having to, she had to do, redo the entire last part of the class because we were supposed to learn a statistical software that's only available on Windows. And it's not that UA could just go out and buy a Mac version. It's not available in a Mac version. And a lot of us had Macs. So she had to redo her entire lesson plans and, layout for what this semester was going to look like for us because not all of us had Windows computers. So we ended up having to use RStudio, which I have a background in computer science and programming. So that was pretty intuitive to me, but I feel like a lot of my classmates struggled there because it's program heavy. You have to know how to do certain computer programs to use that. And so our instructor was great trying to mitigate those issues. But from a student standpoint, it was, our whole class ended up changing. And so I'm lucky that I have proper equipment. I have good internet. I really had no issue moving from the face-to-face class to the online class because she decided to use, and I forgot to say this earlier, but UA kind of left it up to instructors how they wanted to handle the switch to remote learning. And so this instructor decided to still keep meeting at the exact same time. We met via Zoom, and she would just share her screen to do the statistical analysis. And so, I still had the collaboration from my classmates. For us, other than having to figure out how to do it from home and not in the computer lab, we were pretty much unaffected, except she had to completely change what she was going to teach. So did that answer your question? I'm sorry. Did I get off track there?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Taylor, I think you're asking Drew, what are your expectations for the fall? Maybe are you expecting to come back on campus or expecting to be online? Where is your thinking right now in terms of what fall will look like for you?
I expect to go back to campus, but based on the current events and the trajectory, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't. So I'm hoping we go back to campus because I personally am a need to see you in person kind of learner to fully grasp the concepts. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I'm hoping to go back to campus during the fall, to summarize.
So Taylor clarifies, what are your expectations regarding course quality? And so I think that would be a good question for all three of you to answer, given the fact that we're now in June and we still don't know what that model for fall is going to be at a lot of institutions, and issues still exist with students having access to computers and access to the software that they need. I know UAB had to purchase a large number of webcams to try to provide those to students so that they could participate in Zoom meetings that were required or complete activities and things like that. And so maybe Marci and Hannah, you would be better to talk about this from an institution level, but how does that change or affect the expectations of course quality? Drew, since you're unmuted, do you want to talk about that from the student perspective first?
Sure. Course quality, not sure how to answer this actually. I expect something similar to what we just had if we were not to go back to campus, which would be difficult for me given my lack of experience prior experience with this. So I'm expecting heavier course load. I'm expecting more complex tasks to fully get the point across, but I'm not super excited about that. I don't know if that answers the question.
Sure, and Crystal also is asking if you had ever taken an online class before.
Not before the last semester, no.
Okay. Okay, so Hannah or Marci, do one of you want to jump in and talk about
I can
fall
jump in.
course quality expectation?
What from an instructor perspective, what I am planning on doing, and actually today I just got handed what is going to be a face-to-face course, along with my online course that I already teach. But I think for me, I'm designing the course with the understanding that just because I may be allowed to have this course Monday and Wednesday, that we're going to have to overcome some challenges with students that have to isolate and students that have had exposure to the virus. And so even though my class may be permitted to meet, I have to be flexible enough to reach all of my students, whether they can make it there or not. So my plan is to use, we're a Blackboard school, we use Panopto. So what the plan that I've devised in the last 2.5 hours since I was handed this course is to record all of my lectures with Panopto. And so that will give the face-to-face kind of feel, and it will also reach students who either don't feel comfortable coming to class, who can't come to class because there's been and this is a freshman Compass course, so all of these students are required to live on campus. So I'm expecting that a large number of them, I mean, the reality of it, we're not gonna be able to keep it out of the dorms.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to be prepared for anyone that has to self-isolate or that has the virus and can't come to class for 2 weeks. So I'm going to try to bridge all of that into one cohesive welcome to UA course. And so my plan is to use Panopto. I really enjoyed the Zoom office hours with my professor. This is again from a student office hour, or from a student perspective, but that's something that I hadn't done before. I'd never done virtual office hours, but regardless of the presence of this virus or how it affects us, that's probably something I will keep.
And that's interesting that you bring that up, because previously, in my experience in working with faculty, virtual office hours were not very well attended by students who were in truly online classes. But there seems to have now been this great interest from what I've heard people talk about, that in virtual office hours now. And I think this goes back to what Marci mentioned in the difference between remote teaching and online learning, where there may be different sets of expectations for students who signed up to take an on-campus class and were emergency transitioned to online, versus students who are seeking online learning opportunities. So I think that would be kind of an interesting thing to explore, and I'm interested in how that plays out. So there's a question. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, my class has traditionally been online, but all of them are campus students.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just had students coming to my office. And then once we switched to online learning, I mean, I had 0 office hours attendees before March 13th. And then I had at least one every office hour via Zoom after that. So, that was enlightening from an instructor perspective, that's less intimidating. They don't have to come find my office on campus. UA is big, and sometimes they only have maybe 10 minutes, and you can't get to where my office is really in 10 minutes from anywhere on UA's campus. So, it helped me realize that there was a need there that I wasn't meeting. And it wasn't that they didn't want to come visit me, it's that in some cases they couldn't. So,
Marci, do you want to weigh in on any of that?
Sure. I'll say one thing as far as course expectations for the fall. One thing that we did towards the end of April, so we had been in this environment for almost a month, is we participated in a student survey to kind of test the waters, test the temperature, see how we're all doing. And I would, if you haven't had an opportunity to do that, I would encourage that, because we really uncovered several themes associated with the move to online remote learning, and we've kind of documented those very carefully to make sure that the fall courses and in the preparation for the fall, we make sure to address those deficiencies that our students noted. And Drew, as a student, can probably relate to a lot of those, because we had all sorts of themes associated with just a tremendous, we push credit hour compliance, making sure we get that instructional time in all the time with online courses, and our faculty just kind of went overboard with that, it seemed like, because the workload was just tremendous. So we're working on better balance of online instructional activities in the fall. Testing and assessment was a big issue for students. That was a huge change for the face-to-face assessment, face-to-face testing, and then suddenly they're online. And like you mentioned, Courtney, we had issues with webcams and, you know, everybody trying to agree on the same remote proctor, you know, software. So we were having issues with that, trying to work through that. So we identified that. We identified some students were frustrated with the organization of the course, which in faculty, in their defense, they only had a few days to flip the switch. But the course, there was a lot of frustration about course organization. And if we think about it, you know, that's such a simple concept that we can all incorporate in online course design, because, you know, I'm teaching a course now also, and I know how important it is for my students, and when I was an online student too, to be able to go in and expect, you know, those assignments to be in the same place and the lectures to be here, and, you know, it's not confusing. So we really are trying to hit course organization pretty hard for the fall. We've kind of taken the approach that you don't have as much of an excuse at this point, because we're starting as early as we can. And we required, from the Provost office, we required all of the deans to submit their plan for the fall by next Monday. And so that plan is very, very specific, and we included those themes and those in addressing those themes as part of their plan. How are you going to address testing? How are you going to address, you know, course organization? How are you going to address all these different themes? We had another theme that we saw in student open-ended comments about student engagement, and students commented that, hey, you know, I really miss engaging with my classmates and my peers. So we've tried to really encourage faculty to incorporate more of that student engagement. And in my opinion, that's where we had a problem with remote learning, because with the remote learning that a lot of our faculty engaged in, it was just show up for the lecture, faculty member lectures for an hour, hour and 10 minutes, whatever, and then that's it. So it was really missing the student engagement piece. So even for those faculty that are going to continue to participate in remote learning, we want to encourage them to incorporate some sort of student-to-student interaction, student-to-faculty interaction, you know, so there's more interaction in the course. So that was another, I'm looking at my list of themes that we had. Feedback
There was something I just wanted to highlight real quick before you move on to feedback. I think it's an important lesson that I hope faculty learn, but also that we learn when we're working with faculty or designing whatever quality we do, or when we're building classes for those instructional designers who build the classes, but that content delivery is not instructor engagement, and that it's not engaging for students. And research has told us before about online learning that delivering an online lecture is not as effective online as having those engaging activities. So it's interesting that the students brought that up, and that you found that in the student.
They did. And along the lines of lectures, they also mentioned Zoom fatigue, WebEx fatigue, you know, and it was just, you know, please stop with the lectures. And we have tried so hard to talk to faculty about not recording, you know, an hour lecture, an hour and a half lecture, and trying to get them to chunk that content into bite-sized pieces so that the students can, you know, they're not stuck in front of the computer for hours. So that's a challenging argument to win. For some faculty who are just now transitioning to online, they don't really see the benefit of chunking those lectures. But we had so many issues with bandwidth and faculty's, you know, different homes, and we can't upload an hour-and-a-half lecture. And we're like, we know. So we've been telling you, let's try to chunk it. You can upload a 15-minute lecture or a 30-minute, you know. So we've tried to encourage them to do that so that it's a little easier on the student. But I think the feedback, there's a lot of comments about faculty feedback and what they expect with feedback, and it's not just, you know, a grade shows up in Canvas or Blackboard. It's legit feedback, you know, to interact with the students. So we are trying to raise the expectations for faculty in the fall. And I've been very proud of Samford faculty and deans because they've taken on a lot of that themselves. They want to know what the feedback is. They want to know, how can I be better? You know, what can I do to make this course? What were some of the issues that students were facing? So we're trying to make sure that those plans that the deans submit in the next week address all of those issues. And then the best thing I think for us is those plans will then go back to our instructional design team to take a look at. And, you know, we're going to look at what you're proposing, and is that really going to work? And is there an easier way to do that that would benefit the students? So our instructional designers will have some input there, and hopefully we'll have time to affect change in some of those areas noted by the students.
Thank you for that. Chris Alexander made the comment in the chat box that many videos of 5 minutes or less are more likely to be viewed than one video of 20 minutes or longer. And I feel like, personally, I've been preaching this for the 10 years that I've been an instructional designer, and hopefully people will now start to listen to that as more people are exposed to that. So there are two things that I wanted to talk about. One is a question that says, Hannah, do you plan to record a full lecture similar to your traditional classes, or will you adjust the time and topic for this delivery?
Well, I don't know yet because this just came about this morning.
What have you planned in the 2 hours since you got this?
But I guess my plan, some of the feedback that we've gotten on campus is how great it was that instructors were using Panopto. And so even if you're able to actually go to class, it's nice to be able to go back and remediate anything that you need to remediate. And so my idea was just to record the entire course. Like it only meets for like 50 minutes, 2 days a week. But to just try to capture the engagement there in class. And while that does not replace like the student that can't come to class, they do and can feel like they were there, and they get some kind of enrichment from hearing their classmates collaborating with each other. And so I wanted to just kind of have a platform that they would be able to, you know, Panopto, you can't just join. It's not like a Zoom session. It's just video recording kind of software. So they can't come live, which is not ideal. I would love for them to be able to connect live and to be able to record it, which I guess maybe I could, whatever room this in, I could probably do a Zoom session and record the Zoom session, and that might, you know, fix that. But so my idea was just to record the entire class, and then people can go back and watch it if they want. And with that, I'm going to have to come up with some really creative asynchronous assignments and collaborative kind of tools for them to be able to still collaborate with each other, but not be restricted just to that Monday from 12 to 12:50.
And I think kind of what we're talking around that I want to address directly is keeping students engaged and motivated when they're learning remotely or learning in a fully online class. So Drew, as our kind of resident undergraduate student here, will you talk about maybe what some of your instructors did to help you stay motivated, what they could have done more to help you be motivated throughout the rest of the class? Or throughout the semester?
Sure. So as you just said, it's difficult to stay motivated, especially with the shift to remote teaching, to clarify my previous missteps. So I'm not going to put up an air or anything like that. I've skipped some lectures because I just didn't feel the need to attend, seeing as everything else was given to me in other more easily consumable media. So like I actively made the decision to not, but some people did stick to it and they felt as though there was nothing different. So maybe if you're trying to get students to go to online lectures, you would reduce the media that you provide outside of that, but then that takes away some of the substance material, correct? So then wouldn't you in turn just shift further from lecture and more into the other media if you're trying to get the point across?
So when you say other media, do you mean that they were posting videos as well
Right.
as lectures?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. So for example, my chemistry Gen Chem 2 teacher, professor, Dr. Erdman, posted like her going over sections of notes and explaining it and saying why this is important and this, that, and the other. But she'd also have lecture. So I would prefer just the shorter, more easily consumable clips that would go over everything I needed for the test and everything I needed to know for teacher material, as opposed to sitting through an hour of her answering questions that I already have the answers to. Does that?
Were they were,
Questions from this other student
sorry,
body.
instructional design hat is kicking in and I'm so they were questions that she lectured and then there were questions that students submitted like for clarification that she was
Yes,
going over.
exactly. So I would
And you
just,
found that to kind of be redundant?
exactly, because
Is that because they were asking the same questions that were answered in the videos?
sometimes, but also they would ask questions that wouldn't be totally relevant to the subject material. So as a Gen Z student, I'm gonna generalize here, we oftentimes overthink material and make things more complicated than they need to be for the sake of, I need to know this. So it confuses and also wastes time. So oftentimes I tried to drown out the complicators as much as possible, but sometimes it would still get into my notes and I would mess things up on the test. So I found it to be easier to just not go to lecture.
That's interesting.
Right.
Taylor said he's heard this from other students as well. Hannah, when you were taking classes, you did not experience that, right? That your instructors or your professors had a different approach?
Yeah, and I think my experience may be very different from Drew's because I'm a PhD student, and so what my instructor did was our classes were pretty much set up the same. She would lecture for like 20 or 30 minutes, and then we would have time in the lab to go do an assignment, and then we would all come back and kind of talk about that assignment, and then normally we had 2 assignments, and it was a 3-hour chunk of class. So the way she already had it set up was very conducive to us staying engaged and just she had already chunked it enough where we never sat there for 3 hours and listened to her talk. And so from my perspective, that worked really well. She still did the lecture portion, then we would have a break, then we would all come back and normally when we were in class, we met in a classroom and then we would have a 10-minute break and we would move to the computer lab. So just instead of moving to the computer lab, we just all came back to Zoom and she shared her screen with a statistical program instead of her PowerPoint. And so I felt like none of it was really like redundant because we weren't kind of being fed the same information. Mm-hmm. It wasn't information overload. It was what we were used to. She did a very good job of replicating our Zoom sessions to exactly what class was. And that was really nice and refreshing as a student. Because I can see where that could get very overwhelming for a student, especially if you've never taken an online class. And I think she did a really good job there.
So we are getting close to our time. So I want to ask one final kind of reflective question of each of you. And so I want to ask it in two parts. One, what do you wish had been done differently by your institution? And then second, what would you personally have liked to have done differently given your particular role? So what could you have done as a student maybe to help that transition? And then what could the institution have done, or as an administrator or faculty member? What do you wish had been done differently from the institutional level, and what personally would you have done differently if you had a chance to do this over again? So I'll let whoever wants to go first jump in.
I guess I'll go. I think for us, the thing that I wish we would have done different, first I should say the thing I'm most proud of, which I've already mentioned before, is the training and the preparation that I think we've done for the past couple years. And I'm so proud of the, from the March to now, emphasis on training and professional development that the instructional designers did. I mean, they were teaching online all day, some days, just constant. And would I do that differently? No. And I know there's a couple of them on here, and they would probably, I know they were exhausted, but I appreciate that, and I'm so proud of that. So I would do that over and over and over again. I think what I would wish we could have done a better job with from the student.
Joe says that's easy for you to say.
I know it is. I know. I realize that. But we just did a faculty assessment survey also, and faculty were just glowing. Glowing overviews and glowing reviews of what they did in training. So we appreciate them. But I wish we could have gotten a better handle on the technology needs of students, because I think that's something that we overlook, because we don't think that we're all going to be at home all of a sudden. Everybody's going to be in a virtual environment. And we scrambled very much like you mentioned, Courtney, to try to make sure that students had, webcams. And by the time we tried to get webcams, you couldn't find any. They're all sold out, or they were all, so it was very difficult. So we want to really work on, I think my role should be to try to work a little bit more with student affairs as we're going through and getting closer to the fall, so that our students for the fall are a little better prepared in terms of technology needs. Because let's face it, sometimes when you look at technology needs on a syllabus, the students zoom right past that. They're not paying attention to it because it's a face-to-face class. Mm-hmm. So, you're not thinking, are you able to function fully in this virtual environment, and do you have the technology that you need? So we're working on, I'm working on communicating that much more clearly to our student affairs staff, and hopefully they can make sure that's communicated to students so that they arrive on campus with the technology that they really need, not just to survive a face-to-face college experience, but to be able to flip virtually immediately.
That's a great thought. Hannah, do you want to go next? Talk to us about what you wish had been done differently, or what you had done differently.
So I will, I guess, talk from an institutional perspective first, and then I'll talk from my experience as an instructor. But from an institutional perspective, I really feel like we needed a student needs assessment, because once this switched, it was just kind of like, figure it out. There's a Blackboard app. There is this, like, how did you not have a computer? You're Gen Z. You really came to campus without, yes.
What do you mean you're taking an entire class on your cell phone?
Yes. And so there's a gap there between being able to use your phone to whatever that TikTok thing is, and like Instagram and that kind of stuff, and knowing that a phone is not an adequate piece of technology to continue your education. So I think a needs assessment there for students would be nice on an institutional level. But I will say that I think UA's response for the way we were able to flip 6,000 some odd courses from face-to-face to, you know, some kind of remote learning. It was definitely a feat, and I think we did the best that we could. From a CCS administration standpoint, that continuity plan was my baby, and I honestly never thought that we would have to use it, but here we are, and I was really excited that it worked as well as it did. What I learned through writing that plan several years ago and implementing it is that I was a little closed-minded when writing that, because the only continuity exercise or expectation I'd ever had was the tornado coming through Tuscaloosa. That is such a localized kind of disaster that it kind of clouded my ability to write that plan. And you could tell in some of the steps and in some of the wording that I use, I was really just planning on some kind of disaster to just hit campus, not take over the entire.
Not a global pandemic.
Right. So
how did you not see that coming?
You know, for example, our support center also supports the central third of Alabama for Alabama's high school online courses. And so it never occurred to me that I needed to figure out a way to support 40,000 students and a couple 100,000 high school students, because I was just planning on, you know, like if a tornado hits Tuscaloosa, access in Jefferson County, you know, we don't have to worry about all of Jefferson County trying to get on access at the same time. So that's some tweaking that needs to happen there. And from an instructor perspective, I will tell you I was completely unprepared, because I took for granted that my class was already online and my students would not struggle with this. And so the comment I made about the needs assessment was a direct kind of correlation between what happened with one of my students. Like I said, my students take an online course, but most of them are on campus. So this kid went to a computer lab to take his class. And so when he had to go home to rural Tennessee, and he had no computer and he had no internet, and he was having to drive like 30 minutes to get cell phone service so he could try to take a quiz on his phone, you know, that was a problem. And that took a lot to kind of get this student caught up. It took a lot of flexibility. And I also had some international students that in the last week of class were permitted to go home to their home country, but Blackboard Learn is not accessible there.
That's the same issue we had with Canvas.
And so, I mean, my students were required to use a video recording app like Screencast-O-Matic to talk about an educational app. Well, if they don't have access to Blackboard, they're not going to have access to like Twitter either, so they could talk about how Twitter can be used in education.
Right.
So I had to do a lot of assignment adaptation that I wasn't really prepared to do, because I took for granted that my class was already online and we were going to be good, and, you know, they would just be able to adapt. I did kind of have some, you know, foresight into learning. There's a discussion post in my class. It's like the second or third week of class, and it asked them to talk about online learning and how they feel about it. And most of them don't like it. They're taking my class because they're education majors and they don't want to take like a class on Excel. And my class is a computer science class that counts for education majors. So they're taking my class and we've thrown them into this online course, and they don't like it because they don't get to see each other. You know, they don't get to see me, you know, unless they want to. And so I already kind of knew how they felt about it. So what I tried to do was just open up all of the due dates to kind of alleviate everything moving online, because I knew most of them already hated it, and that was going to be kind of a shock to their system. And but even that really wasn't enough. So from an instructor perspective, I will be much more prepared next time, and just not take for granted that just because you take an online class doesn't mean that they are prepared to do this away from Tuscaloosa.
Sure. Drew, you want to close this out? What you wish had been done differently? And for those of you who need to go, because I know we're a little bit over on time. Thank you for joining us, and we have 2 more sessions next week. Like I said, we'll be talking about experiential learning, and then on the 26th, we'll be talking about faculty training. So we hope that you will join us for those. So if you have to go, I understand. Thank you for being in here. Drew, do you want to talk about what your experience has been?
Sure. So as a student, I don't have a lot of control over the structural dynamic of a school, obviously. So I can only talk about what I could have done as a student. And, you know, obviously, people have gone through great lengths to get these online lectures set up, and all the training's been done. So it would make sense for me to at least utilize all of that as a student. So that's step 1. Another thing that could have happened as a student was, like, I don't know, a little bit more of willpower, I guess is the word. Because towards the end of 2nd semester, it got a little bit harder to, like, stick to classes and apply yourself as you would normally. So I guess the fortitude is a factor. Outside of that, I really don't know what else could have been done. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody, again, for being here. If you are not a member of AIDN and you are interested in becoming a member of AIDN, here are all of the ways that you can connect with us. Facebook is our primary, and email is our primary way of communicating with people right now. So please take advantage of those. Thank you so much again for being here. We really appreciate it, and we hope you have a great rest of your Friday and a wonderful weekend. Thanks, you guys.